Good morning, I'm Remo, and this is the Daily Signal for October 3rd, 2025. Breaking overnight, Putin directly threatens to attack Ukraine's nuclear power plants, asking, "What's stopping us?" at an international forum. Stay tuned for the rest of the stories.
Unfiltered. Now,
Here are the other top stories for October 3rd, 2025. Munich airport shut down completely after multiple drone sightings, stranding 3,000 passengers overnight. Manchester attacker officially named as authorities confirm anti-Semitic hate crime targeting Jewish victims. Israeli Navy intercepts activist boats attempting to break Gaza blockade, multiple arrests reported. Madagascar's president dissolves entire government as resignation calls intensify across the nation. Eiffel Tower closes its doors as nationwide strikes paralyze France's tourism industry. Hamas signals positive response to Trump's new Gaza peace plan, but demands key changes. French authorities arrest entire crew of suspected Russian Shadow Fleet oil tanker. Generation Z protesters sweep across Africa from Madagascar to Morocco, demanding political change. Israel blocks main Gaza City road, giving residents final evacuation warning before military operations. Now let's dive into each story. Russian President Vladimir Putin made his most explicit nuclear threat yet against Ukraine yesterday. Speaking at the Valdai International Discussion Club, Putin asked, "What's stopping us?" when discussing potential strikes on Ukrainian nuclear power plants. Here's what happened. Putin was addressing international analysts and journalists when he escalated his rhetoric beyond conventional targets. This marks the first time he's directly threatened nuclear facilities, crossing a red line that even Russia has previously avoided. The timing matters critically. Ukraine operates 15 nuclear reactors across 4 power plants, providing roughly half the country's electricity. Any attack would risk catastrophic radiation release affecting millions across Europe. Why this matters to you? Nuclear facility attacks could trigger Article 5 NATO responses, potentially drawing the US and allies into direct conflict. Global energy markets are already responding with oil prices jumping 3% overnight. International nuclear watchdogs are calling emergency sessions today, while NATO has scheduled crisis talks for this afternoon. Meanwhile, in Germany, Munich airport completely shut down last night after waves of unidentified drones appeared near active runways. Over 3,000 passengers were stranded as 17 flights were grounded and dozens more diverted to Stuttgart, Vienna, and Frankfurt. The crisis began at 9 p.m. local time when air traffic control spotted multiple drones in restricted airspace. Unlike single drone incidents, this involved coordinated activity across several entry points, forcing a complete operational halt. Airport officials set up emergency sleeping areas and distributed food to stranded travelers. The facility didn't reopen until 6 a.m. this morning, causing ripple delays across European air traffic. Here's the concerning detail. German authorities haven't identified who operated the drones or their purpose. This follows similar incidents at U.S. military bases and UK airports in recent months. Why this affects you? Airport drone attacks are becoming a preferred method for disrupting critical infrastructure. Security experts warn this could be testing response times for larger coordinated attacks. The economic impact hits immediately. European flight delays are expected through the weekend as airlines reschedule thousands of connections. British authorities have named the suspect in yesterday's Manchester anti-Semitic attack, with Labour leader Keir Starmer confirming the perpetrator attacked Jews because they are Jews. The attack specifically targeted members of Manchester's Jewish community, though police haven't released casualty numbers or the exact location pending family notifications. What we know is this was a premeditated hate crime with clear anti-Semitic motivation. Starmer's statement came during an emergency parliament session where he called it an attack on Britain's values of tolerance and diversity. The suspect is in custody, with charges expected by Friday. The broader context: UK anti-Semitic incidents have increased 65% over the past year, according to security services. Manchester's Jewish community, Britain's second largest, has been on heightened alert since tensions escalated in the Middle East. Why this matters globally? Anti-Semitic attacks in Western capitals directly impact international Jewish communities and influence foreign policy decisions. European leaders are meeting Thursday to discuss coordinated responses to rising hate crimes. This connects directly to our next Middle East story. The Israeli Navy intercepted multiple boats attempting to break the Gaza blockade, arresting international activists in international waters. The confrontation happened approximately 20 nautical miles from Gaza's coast. While exact numbers haven't been confirmed, reports suggest dozens of activists from various humanitarian organizations were attempting to deliver medical supplies and food to Gaza. Israeli naval forces used standard boarding procedures to take control of the vessels. The activists will be processed through Israeli immigration detention before likely deportation to their home countries. This follows established protocols from previous blockade-running attempts. Here's what's significant. These interceptions typically increase when Gaza tensions escalate, serving as early warning indicators for broader conflict escalation. The timing coincides with renewed diplomatic efforts. The international angle. Several European nationals were reportedly among the arrested activists, which could strain Israel's relationships with EU allies. European foreign ministries are demanding consular access. This directly relates to Hamas's response to Trump's new peace initiative. Hamas leadership is signaling a positive response to President Trump's new Gaza peace proposal, but sources indicate they'll request significant modifications to the framework. Trump's plan, details of which remain confidential, reportedly includes reconstruction funding, governance structures, and security arrangements. Hamas's conditional acceptance represents the first diplomatic opening in months. The key detail you need to know: Hamas hasn't fully accepted any international peace proposal in over 5 years. Their willingness to negotiate, even with conditions, represents a major shift in strategy. Sources suggest Hamas wants changes to provisions about disarmament timelines and international monitoring presence. They're also seeking guarantees about reconstruction authority and border control responsibilities. Why this breakthrough matters. Trump's influence with both Israeli and Arab leaders could enable negotiations that Biden administration efforts haven't achieved. Regional powers, including Saudi Arabia and Egypt, are reportedly supportive. This could impact the current military situation in Gaza City. Israeli forces have blocked the main road into Gaza City, giving residents what military officials call final evacuation warnings before expanded military operations begin. The roadblock affects the Salahuddin Road, Gaza's primary north-south transportation corridor. Israeli leaflets dropped overnight urged civilians to move south within 24 hours, though exact numbers of affected residents weren't provided. This is significant because Gaza City houses roughly 400,000 people in normal circumstances, though current population estimates vary due to ongoing displacement. Blocking the main road effectively traps residents between expanding military zones. Humanitarian organizations report they cannot verify safe passage corridors or destination safety for evacuating civilians. The UN has called the ultimatum insufficient for safe evacuation. The military context. Israeli forces appear preparing for intensive urban operations in Gaza City's northern districts. This would represent the largest military escalation in months. Global implications. Forced civilian evacuations risk triggering international war crimes investigations and could impact the peace negotiations we just discussed. Speaking of international tensions, French maritime authorities arrested the entire crew of an oil tanker suspected of belonging to Russia's Shadow Fleet, vessels used to circumvent international sanctions. The arrests happened in French territorial waters, though officials haven't named the specific vessel or crew size. These tankers typically carry Russian oil to buyers willing to ignore sanctions, generating billions in revenue for Moscow's war effort. Here's why this matters. The Shadow Fleet includes hundreds of older tankers, often with unclear ownership and inadequate insurance, carrying sanctioned oil across global shipping routes. They pose environmental and safety risks beyond sanctions violations. French authorities are coordinating with EU partners to track other suspected vessels. This arrest could provide intelligence about the entire Shadow Fleet network's operations and financing. The economic angle. Successfully disrupting shadow fleet operations directly impacts Russia's war funding while potentially affecting global oil prices. Each intercepted tanker can carry millions of barrels worth hundreds of millions of dollars. This enforcement action reflects broader European determination to maintain sanctions pressure despite energy market concerns. Now shifting to African political developments. Madagascar President Andry Rajoelina dissolved his entire government yesterday, but opposition calls for his own resignation continue intensifying across the island nation. The government dissolution affects all cabinet ministers and comes amid mounting pressure over economic mismanagement and alleged corruption scandals. However, Rajoelina retains presidential powers and has announced plans to form a new cabinet within weeks. What's driving the crisis? Madagascar faces its worst economic situation in decades, with inflation exceeding 15% and widespread food insecurity affecting millions. Opposition groups blame Rajoelina's policies for the deteriorating conditions. Street protests in the capital Antananarivo have continued for 3 weeks, with demonstrators demanding not just government change, but Rajoelina's complete removal from power. Why Madagascar matters globally? The island nation controls critical shipping lanes between Africa and Asia, while possessing significant mineral resources, including rare earth elements essential for technology manufacturing. Political instability could disrupt these strategic interests and potentially trigger regional migration flows. This connects to broader African youth movements. Young protesters are challenging governments from Madagascar to Morocco, representing the largest wave of youth-led political activism in Africa's recent history. These protests share common themes: economic opportunity, government transparency, and political representation, but each country faces specific triggers. Morocco's protests focus on employment and education access, while Senegal's center on democratic reforms. The numbers are impressive. Millions of young Africans have participated in demonstrations over the past 2 months, with social media coordination enabling unprecedented organization across national borders. What makes this movement different? Previous African protests often focused on single issues or leaders. These Generation Z movements demand systemic change across multiple countries simultaneously, sharing tactics and solidarity messages. Global implications. Africa's median age is 19, making youth satisfaction crucial for continental stability. These protests could reshape African politics for decades while affecting international partnerships and investment flows. European and Chinese leaders are closely monitoring these developments, as political instability could impact trade relationships and migration patterns. Finally, France faces its own domestic challenges. The Eiffel Tower closed to visitors yesterday as nationwide strikes spread across France's tourism and transportation sectors, potentially affecting millions of visitors during peak autumn season. Multiple unions are participating, including transportation workers, museum staff, and hospitality employees. Their demands center on pension reforms, wage increases, and working condition improvements. The economic impact hits immediately. France's tourism industry generates over 50 billion euros annually, with the Eiffel Tower alone attracting 7 million visitors yearly. Each day of closure costs the economy millions in lost revenue. Strike organizers haven't announced duration, but similar actions have lasted weeks in previous years. Hotels report increasing cancellation rates as tourists avoid uncertainty. Why this affects global markets? French strikes often spread to other European countries and can disrupt continental transportation networks. Previous strikes have affected everything from air traffic to shipping schedules. The political context. These strikes represent a major challenge to President Macron's government, potentially weakening France's position in EU leadership and international negotiations. Tourism industry leaders are calling for emergency government intervention to minimize economic damage during the critical autumn visitor season. Looking across today's stories, 3 critical patterns emerge that will shape global events in the coming weeks. First, escalation risks are multiplying simultaneously. Putin's nuclear threats against Ukraine, Israel's Gaza operations intensifying, and coordinated drone attacks on critical infrastructure all represent potential flashpoints for broader conflicts. Second, youth movements are reshaping political landscapes globally. From Generation Z protests across Africa to strike actions in France, young people are demanding change through direct action. This generational shift affects everything from economic policy to international relations. Third, established systems are under unprecedented pressure. Aviation security against coordinated drone attacks, sanctions enforcement requires dramatic arrests, and diplomatic solutions face narrow windows before military escalation. What this means for you: these aren't isolated incidents, but interconnected pressures on global stability. Market volatility, travel disruptions, and security concerns will likely intensify as these situations develop. The key insight: traditional diplomatic and security responses are struggling to address simultaneous crises created by new technologies, demographic shifts, and evolving conflict strategies. Tomorrow's developments in any of these areas could trigger much broader consequences across all of them. That's your daily signal for October 3rd, 2025. Stay informed, stay prepared, and we'll see you tomorrow with the next day's critical updates.
Unfiltered.